We tend to picture early Rome as a gleaming marble metropolis. In reality, it started as a swampy homeless camp with high ambitions. To populate their new settlement, the early Romans opened their doors to anyone willing to show up: runaway slaves, exiles, dodging debtors, and criminals. Even their own foundation myth leans into this feral reputation. Look at this bronze statue. Romans proudly claimed their founders, Romulus and Remus, were literal castaways raised by a wild wolf. And how did those twins decide exactly where to build their city? They got into a sibling argument, and Romulus murdered his brother. This gritty origin story matched their daily reality. That camp full of runaway men had exactly 0 women. To solve their demographic crisis, they threw a massive festival, invited a neighboring tribe called the Sabines, and mid-party kidnapped all the Sabine women to be their wives. Rome's cultural DNA was set. They didn't build their society on high-minded philosophy or peaceful negotiation. If they needed something, they took it by absolute force. Initially, these early Romans accepted being ruled by kings. That worked out for a while, until the 7th king took power. He was so incredibly cruel that the citizens violently expelled him from the city. The Romans swore they would never tolerate a monarch again. They invented a convoluted system of government called a republic, electing 2 consuls to rule simultaneously. Each held the power to veto the other, a hardwired failsafe designed entirely to prevent tyranny. Then, a massive trauma shattered their sense of security. The invading Gauls smashed through the Roman defenses, looted the city, and burned almost all of it to the ground. The Romans only survived by paying a heavy ransom in gold. This humiliation broke something deep inside the Roman psyche. Surviving the fire meant making a single, unbreakable vow: nobody would ever do this to them again. This specific trauma broke Rome's sense of security, triggering its shift into a hyper-aggressive, ultra-militaristic machine. Rome's new geopolitical strategy was simple. The only way to ensure absolute security was to completely obliterate anyone who lived near them before they could even think about attacking. You can see the result of that paranoia in these leveled stone ruins. During the Punic Wars, the Romans went beyond military victory. They deleted the entire city and its civilization from existence. With their biggest rival gone, Rome got addicted to conquest. They absorbed Spain, marched through Greece, and flattened the tribes of Gaul. And that aggressive culture produced Julius Caesar. By dismantling Gaul and invading Britain, he built an immense personal army. He returned to Rome holding a dangerous level of unchecked military power. The Senate panicked. Their entire republic was designed to prevent exactly this kind of singular rule. They decided to save their democracy by murdering Caesar in the middle of a meeting. Naturally, the public, who actually liked Caesar, was furious, and a massive civil war erupted. The Romans had spent centuries building an unstoppable military to protect their republic, only for that exact military machine to tear their republic apart. Out of the ashes stepped the first emperor, Augustus. Augustus inherited a state where the soldiers had stopped fighting for Rome and started fighting for the individual generals who promised them loot. So he bought their loyalty for the state. He turned the military into a professional standing army. Soldiers enlisted for 20 years, received standardized pay, and when they retired, the government handed them a guaranteed land grant. He also hit the brakes on endless expansion. Instead of pushing out, Rome hardened its borders and poured money into vast infrastructure projects, like these stone arches, paved highways, and organized city centers. If you lived inside those borders, your life was highly predictable. Famines and crimes were handled by an active administration. Outside the borders, decentralized tribal societies lived without standing armies or permanent infrastructure. Augustus successfully killed the Republic, but he ended the civil wars and stabilized the state. However, he accidentally hard-coded a fatal flaw. Absolute political power now belonged exclusively to whoever controlled the army. It didn't take long for the soldiers stationed closest to the throne to realize they held all the leverage. The Praetorian Guard, originally an elite unit created just to protect the emperor, quickly learned they controlled the empire's ultimate bottleneck. Emperors like Nero learned the hard way that when you lose the confidence of the guard, your reign is over. The Praetorians began assassinating leaders they didn't like. and at their absolute peak, they literally auctioned the throne to the highest bidder. This triggered the chaos of the 3rd century. Emperors were violently replaced almost weekly. Plagues wiped out populations, hyperinflation ruined the economy, and the administrative state ballooned out of control to manage the constant warfare. Rome was simply too massive to govern under one roof. The radical solution was to chop the empire in half. The wealthy, intellectual elite packed up and moved east, establishing a new Christian capital in Constantinople, where the Hagia Sophia would eventually stand. Dividing the empire kept the eastern half alive for another 1,000 years, but it meant abandoning the original city of Rome, leaving the western, Latin-speaking half as an underfunded, hollowed-out shell. The culminating crisis arrived at the Danube River. Tens of thousands of Gothic refugees, fleeing a violent campaign by the Huns, showed up at Rome's borders, desperately asking for asylum. Rome let them in, but deeply corrupt provincial officials exploited the crisis, starving the refugees to line their own pockets. The desperate Goths did exactly what you'd expect. They picked up weapons and revolted from inside the borders. As you can see on this map, the Western Empire was too weak to push them back out. They adopted a desperate strategy, handing over massive chunks of territory to armed groups they couldn't defeat, hoping to buy peace. The end didn't come in an epic, world-ending battle. In the year 476, a Germanic military commander simply walked right up to the final, exhausted Roman emperor and politely told him to step down, and he did. Rome didn't fall to a single enemy. Its deep historical trauma built an aggressive, paranoid machine obsessed with absolute military dominance, and in the end, that bloated machine simply devoured itself.